Hey, heathens. So, the other night I'm in Stickam, right? And the suggestion is made that maybe we should ship off all radical fundamentalist religious people to a remote island and let them have their own little area and everyone else ignore them. It is suggested that maybe Antarctica would be the best island to put them on. I don't want to get into the argument of whether or not it's an island or not. Let's just go with it, okay? I made the comment, well, before you can do that, you have to sell the idea that they are supposed to go so that they'll willingly go, because obviously you're not going to be able to force them. So I asked the room, figure out whether or not there is a verse in the Bible that would support such a notion. Well, Icon 999 came up with this one, and it comes from the book you would expect it to come from. And this is the ultimate test of faith book of the Old Testament, Job. And he points out to me Job 38:22. Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow, or hast thou seen the treasures of the hell? Now, hell has no treasure, unless they're talking about heaven, which starts me on a project. Now, understand that before a prophecy can become a prophecy, someone has to figure out that it is a prophecy. And when you look at these things that these people are pulling out now to suggest that, the biblical prophecies are coming true as we speak, you have to look at how they're doing this. They're picking verses that would come together to formulate the opinion they've already gotten. And it works pretty good. So I'm going to give you now my explanation, because I went back and I said, well, let's make sure that it fits. And sure enough, it did. I went back and I made sure that this entire prophecy fit, so that you understand that it was prophesied in the Old Testament that all Christians should go to the poles in order to be sent through a portal in order to go to heaven. That's how the rapture will occur. It's not going to happen like randomly while you're out. You have to actually go. You have to take the physical step to do so, and it's right there in the Bible and it explains it to you. So here's the prophecy of the pole portals. So let's start with the context of the entire verse. This is the point where Job has finally had enough of God screwing him over and taking away all of his crap and punishing him for being a believer so that he can win this bet with Satan for whatever reason. And Job has pointed out, hey, what's up? I'm good. Why are you, messing with me? And God has this to say: Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare, if thou hast understanding. Now God goes on into a little bit more detail. He breaks this down a little bit. But let's pay attention to exactly what he says when he gets to this verse. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? What line would he be talking about here? Longitude lines, maybe? And then it gets even more interesting when you get to verse 7. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Think about this. At the poles, days and nights last much longer, so the stars and suns have more time to sing together. It gets even more interesting when you get to verses 8 and 9, where verses 8 talks about the doors, and then 9 talks about bands and the clouds. Check it out. Or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? When I made the cloud the garment thereof, and thick darkness a swaddling band for it. A darkness while a swaddling band? I mean, come on. That's where the aurora borealis happens. Surely somewhere in this cloud, in this swaddling band, we're talking about the aurora borealis. However, maybe the bands are the actual lines of longitude, and the cloud or the garment that they're talking about is what that is. But still, surely, we're talking about the poles and the aurora borealis at this point right here. Verse 10 is especially important, and you'll understand why in just a little bit. And break up for it my decreed place, and set bars and doors. We already talked about the doors, and now we're talking about the decreed place. Well, what is the decreed place? Well, that's heaven, where everyone is supposed to go. Clearly, this thing is talking about how you get to heaven at this point in time in this prophecy. Now, verse 13 is very special because it talks about the ends of the earth. Now, I know I went through a 4-part series where I discussed to you how the Bible thought that the earth was flat and so that there were ends that could be shaken, but maybe that's not what it actually was talking about. Listen to this. That it might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding in that ends were supposed to be the end, or the final products. Maybe that's why it's plural. I'm not exactly sure. Although the end is definitely a big part here because that's where the rapture comes in. So that's key. Now verses 16 and 17 get to the part where we talk about this portal that we're discussing. So, in order for us to be accurate with our prophecy here, we have to make sure that there is actually a gateway. We discussed the doors earlier, but let's take a look at these two verses to see how it comes together. Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea, or hast thou walked in the search of the depth? Have the gates of the depth been opened unto thee, or hast thou seen the doors to the shadow of death? Death. Interesting there. You open the gates to death, the springs of the sea, and you sea surrounds all of Antarctica, and of course North Pole is all seas, just with ice on top of it. Well, until global warming finishes it off. But still, very interesting there. Okay, and so now we close in on the final verse that would lead to our prophecy, verse 22. Watch as we go through 18 through 22 to get to the verse that we're talking about here. Hast thou perceived the breadth of the earth? Declare if thou knowest it all. Where is the way where the light dwelleth? And as for darkness, where is the place thereof? That thou shouldest take it to the bound thereof, and that thou shouldest know the paths to the house thereof. House? Interesting. House. Maybe the house of God, or, I don't know, maybe heaven? Sure. Knowest thou it because thou wast then born, or because the number of thy days is great? Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow, or hast thou seen the treasures of hell? And back we are to the verse where we start. But it doesn't end there, because verse 23 further solidifies what we're talking about. Which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle and war. Time of trouble? The day? Battle and war? This has got to be Armageddon, right? Okay, so now let's sum it all up. You have these bands, the Aurora Borealis, and these doors, the portal, and these places where the lines come together, longitude and latitude. Where do the longitude lines all come together? The bands, the swaddling bands that come together. If it's not the Aurora Borealis, then it has to be that, right? And here's this doorway to go into this gate of heaven. We're shaking the evil out, the war that comes later. This is all obviously a prophecy of the things to come, where the world is going to come to an end. Jesus is going to return. He's going to battle Satan, and they're going to fight. Meanwhile, if you want to get out, you have to get to the doors where the bands come together, where the lines are drawn at each of the north and south poles. So, for all of you who think that the world is about to end because the Armageddon is about to take place and the rapture is coming, you need to move to the south and north poles. Okay, so there you go. I've given you your prophecy. I've explained it to you clearly. I don't know how all of you guys missed it all these years, but hey, don't take my word for it. Think for yourself.